My name is Nina McConigley. So if I count graduate school, which I think I can, I've taught for 9 years, and but I've been teaching at the University of Wyoming, not as a student, for 4 years. So I kind of teach all different classes. I teach in the past I've taught for English and honors, so I teach a lot of the freshman and sophomore level classes. I teach the Indian short story, which I really love. I'm teaching post-colonial lit in the fall. I teach a hybrid creative writing lit class, and I teach a lot of colloquium. So I have an undergraduate degree in English from St. Olaf College, and then I did an MA in English here at the University of Wyoming. And then I did an MFA in creative writing in fiction at the University of Houston. You know, I think about this a lot because I actually am a writer first. I published my first book last year. And I love teaching in combination with writing because I feel like you get to talk about books with people and you get to talk about amazing big life issues and things that you're thinking about. You get to think about, race and gender and religion and class and all these things, and you get to talk about it with a bunch of smart people in the room. And so to me, there are days I walk out and I just got paid for that, which is awesome because you get to talk about really cool stuff all the time, which I love. I really love that. And I feel like it feeds my own writing, things I'll talk about with my students. I think about that, then I think about that for my own work, and I'll think, oh, yeah, we just talked about the way this novel was structured, and that makes me think about my own work, which I love. So I'm not a big lecture person. I really believe in discussion. I like to sort of have a line of inquiry into the text with my students. So I typically will pose some questions to them, and then we'll talk about them together. Sometimes I lecture I think certain texts require a little bit of context, and you can't read, Frederick Douglass or Milton without having some context of the world they were writing out of. But so I do have a little lecture, but I mostly am pretty discussion and question based. Or I'll have them do an in-class writing assignment, and then we'll talk about what they just wrote. So a little bit of all. I don't give tests at all, so that's not the way I assess how well students learn. Just especially in light of the classes I teach. If I taught another subject, probably I would love tests. But for me, it's all about discussion. So that being said, there are always students that are quieter, and I don't know what they're thinking, and I have no idea what's up. So I like seeing a paper. I like seeing a critical, more analytical way of looking at a text and making an argument, which sometimes in class it's more discussion, but I think the good thing about a paper is you're making a point and you're kind of arguing and sticking with it. And I think that's really important for being able to be a critical thinker, is to be able to have a thought and back it up. So I'm really papers, discussion. I also think it's important to present and talk about the text. I make my students always do presentations around the text. They sign up for certain days that they want to present. And again, it's nicer to give the class a bigger picture of why this is important. What historical moment is this coming out of? What is why is this important? Because sometimes certain names you hear Milton, Shakespeare, and they're important, but I think making students back up why it's important and why we still read it, and asking good questions that the class can then discuss. I think for certain disciplines, obviously, it's important to know an answer. If you need to know what 2 + 2 is, Dostoevsky would argue. I think it's important to know an answer. But I think it's important to come to that answer. I know at least for me in my writing, whether it even be fiction or whether it be critical paper, often I don't know what the answer is until it's sort of funny because I always say write your thesis first, but sometimes you get to the end of the paper and you're like, oh right, that's what I was talking about. I didn't totally know that. And then you realize what you're trying to argue or say. So I think sometimes coming to that answer takes some work. Or you think you know one way, and then you're just like, oh, well, actually, that that didn't roll out the way I thought it was going to be. So I think it's always interesting to watch students. A lot of times when they'll turn in early drafts of their papers, or they'll give me their thesis, and then I later read the paper and I'm like, wait a minute, you're saying completely the opposite of what you said to me earlier, and it's like they've come to a different conclusion. This is a question I think all the time, because I don't ever have English majors, almost. I, thus far this year, have not had one English major. And I think reading makes you a better person. I think reading makes you a more empathetic person to the world. I think you see the world in a completely different way when you read a variety of experiences and things that you necessarily wouldn't think about if you weren't reading it. And there's something about a story or a narrative. I mean, you can have someone talk about, you know, I don't know. You can have someone talk. You can read a nonfiction piece about, say, World War II, and that's fine. You can read a journalistic piece. But gosh, when you read like a novel or look at a graphic novel about it, it's a completely different experience. And I think it hits you in a way that the story becomes human to you in a way that I think literature is a great thing in that way. It really humanizes everybody, and it gives you empathy, and it makes you see the world and emotions. And even if you don't love Dostoevsky, you can look at a person like the character from No Sin Underground, and you can be like, maybe that's not how I want to live my life. I don't want to live that way. I want to be more present in the world. And so it can also be instructive, and I think that doesn't matter what discipline you're in. And also I think all of these classes make you a better writer, and it doesn't matter what profession you're in, you are going to write, whether you're in the sciences or whether you're, whatever you're doing. Even if you're in music, you're going to be writing at some point and having to express yourself. So I think having these core classes that really focus on that and hone that skill is really important to me. Oh my God, there's so many. I've been in a lot of school. I've had a lot of teachers who've influenced me, and I think the teachers who've influenced me the most are sometimes the teachers that really challenged me, or I was reading something or doing something that I didn't necessarily think I liked. And boy, by the end of the semester, I love it when a student who's like, I always have someone on the first day of class who says like, I'm a math major, I don't do English, I don't read, I don't like it. Like, I'm doing this because it's a required class. And I love that student at the end of the semester who's like, oh, I actually really like this. And I think for me, those teachers that could really open up a subject that I didn't think I was interested in, or I didn't have a huge amount of, I just thought, oh, I don't connect with this. And then, boy, at the end of the semester, I was like, wow, I actually did connect with that. I think those teachers have been really influential to me. I think teachers who, for me, let me be creative and also taught to my strengths, which were, I didn't know I was going to be a writer or a fiction writer down the road when I was in college, but teachers that encourage that sort of creative way of thinking or writing, I really appreciate. And so I think as a teacher, I try to do that too. Like, I try to work with all different students who really like traditional papers that are thesis-based, and students who like to do a more creative option. I like to try to give them all different learners a different way to you have to stick to the core text, but I think the way you analyze or think about a text can be a lot of different ways. So I like that.
And he's almost saying like you have to say like 2 + 2 is 5.
We have the free will to say that and to believe that is what.
And you have to try it to be free. You have to sort of.
Yeah.
Like free will issues like logic though too.
Yeah, I feel like by establishing logic, you promote free will.
He doesn't.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't, but he doesn't see it that way, right? Like.
Well, this is not really a novel. This is like the notes from a therapist, so I don't really.
Yeah,
That being said, I was kind of expecting him to be like, yeah, and then alien showed up. Like, this is how rough my life is. Like, I expected him to be just completely delirious half the time. Like, after reading this.
his idea is that if you're a man of consciousness or whatever, that you're not, like, that you, it doesn't totally make sense to me either, to be honest, of why you would accept that as, like, I mean, it seems sort of like I mean, I feel like in life you have, I don't know, this is where like it goes back to like when we were talking about like Plato and various other things, like, I mean, I guess if you accept that those shadows in the cave are what's real, then you're accepting one thing, but like, I don't feel like by accepting 2 + 2 = 4, we're like
No, it's like, that's saying
particularly
that,
delusional.
No, that's saying that you've like experienced 4 objects, you know, and seen it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, like, I don't know why that means that you.
Are not free.
If you have 2 piles of apples, 2 apples of each, and put them together, you're gonna get 4.
Right, so I don't know that, I mean, that's a notion that's a little weird. The other notion, I mean, again, this book is obviously a subject of its time, and I think you could turn it around and make it more advanced, or more contemporary now. But he sort of talks, how is the role of literature in books in this? Like, what's his feeling about